Hello, everyone. Welcome back for day 2 of this Adobe Live. I'm your host, Fabiola Lara. Thank you for joining us once again for part 2 of this stream with web and brand designer Kenzi Green of Kenzi Green Design. Are you ready for day 2 here, Kenzi?
I am so excited. Today is where everything really comes together.
I can't wait to see that. Now, before we get started, be sure to check out the Creative Cloud Express streams on Monday and Tuesday mornings. This week, Voodoo Val will show you how to get started in the easy to use app so you can create content for your Patreon. Plus, start your day with the creative encores of the Photoshop Creative Challenges hosted by Sam Peterson every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Tune in and challenge yourself with a new prompt each day. Now, if you're joining us from YouTube, I recommend you jump over to Behance. Just go to behance.net/Adobe Live. This way you can ask Kenzi questions in the chat and be a part of our amazing creative community. Lastly, remember you can catch the replays for all of our Adobe live streams, even when we're offline. So go ahead and bookmark this page so you can come back to it whenever you need a little refresh. Now let's check out the chat here, Kenzi. We got Voodoo Val, we got Wade, we got Jack Watson. Hello, everyone. Becca Smith, welcome back to the show. All right, Kenzi, I'm going to hand it over to you. So feel free to reintroduce yourself for all the newbies who weren't here yesterday, and then tell us what we're getting into today.
Yeah, so hello everybody. If you weren't here yesterday, my name is Kenzi. I am the brand and web designer behind Kenzi Green Design. I have been designing since 2018. I graduated fully self-employed with my design degree in 2019. And since then, I have worked with over 300 creative business owners, entrepreneurs. And at this point in time, I do tend to work with a lot of people who have previously established businesses and they're just at a point where they're really ready to level up. And my style falls between a mix of luxe, minimalist, upscale, and then really bold and fun, which is kind of like the brand that we are working on today.
I'm so amped to see this. We left off in an amazing place yesterday, and I just can't wait to see what's next here. Yes, here we are. We're back to the project. Why don't you give us a little walkthrough of what's going on and catch us up, and then tell us what the plan is for today for anyone who missed yesterday.
Yeah, so for anyone that wasn't here yesterday, I am working on a syrup brand, and I really wanted to take a non-traditional approach because if we zoom in here, we can see that a lot of the syrup brands typically come to the market with reds and yellows and blues, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more youthful and fun and really focused on the joy of breakfast. And the target market is really parents, grandparents, and ultimately children who, have family time, eat breakfast together, and people who really value that time. So here is the mood board, and this was some inspiration. Here's the current color palette we are working with. And here's the logo that was created yesterday. I did hand create this entire type right here because I wanted it to be really funky and fun. And I also couldn't find a font that really replicated this style here. So this one is completely hand done. And this one is an actual font. This is Kayla Bold. Some of you may be familiar with that font. I love that font for youthful, playful brands. Over here, we have the secondary logo that we created yesterday. So just kind of like a simplified version of the primary logo. And if we go right over here, we have our brand marks, which kind of love more than the primary and secondary logo, but that's okay. That's okay.
It happens.
It happens. These are my favorite things to create out of pretty much any brand I ever work on. I just love creating these because you can get a little bit more abstract and don't always have to necessarily follow as many rules since they're kind of variations of the primary and secondary logo. And as we move over here, we have the brand pattern. Now, again, I created all these icons yesterday, and I will say I did go back, and I don't know if some of you noticed, but I did change out the script font because I was not happy with the one we picked yesterday, but for the sake of time, I didn't want to sit there, researching and looking through all the different fonts. So I ended up replacing it with this one, and I feel like it's just a little bit more bold and it's a lot thicker than the one we had yesterday, and I feel like that really fits the brand a lot better. So today we're going to work on finalizing everything, including the label design, which is really where you get to start seeing how this works in context.
I can't wait. I definitely noticed that you changed that script yesterday, but for the better, 100%, because the weight of that font is plays a lot better with the icons that you created. And now I'm even more excited to see this label design finally come together. I feel like this is like kind of the gem of all the collateral because it's the product itself. So I'm very amped to see how you put this together. I just want to remind everyone in the chat, you can drop your questions for Kenzi while we're working here so you can get your questions answered. Go ahead, drop them in the chat and we'll, get to you. Now, Kenzi, what's the first step here to create this label?
So as you can see, I already have some text in here that I did want to incorporate. Obviously, we need the logo, and I did actually get a syrup bottle that we had at the house and kind of looked at it, and it seems like for the most part, the main requirements to have on the front of the label are at minimum like the fluid ounces. So like anytime when it comes to label design, you have to really do your research and look to see what you have to put on the front. Obviously, the rest of the information like the nutrition facts, barcode, all that is on the back. So, not too much information is going here on the front. And it seems like through my research, I also noticed a lot of them have like some little symbol that's like all organic or like non-GMO. So I definitely wanted to incorporate that just to make it feel more realistic.
Yes, those little details definitely take it from like a passion project or like spec work to something a little bit more polished and realistic, and seems like you can actually shop it at the store. What is this shape that you're working in when you get a chance?
Yeah, so I was actually going to talk about that because people are probably like, what is this?
What is happening?
I do already have a mock-up picked out for a syrup bottle, and I went ahead into Photoshop and opened that mock-up up, and I was able to see the actual canvas size. So essentially this rectangle here, I could design on this whole rectangle, but I wanted the label to kind of be this round shape here to really flow with the bottle. So I looked at the canvas size in Photoshop and then recreated that same size using this rectangle in Adobe Illustrator. So I know whatever I'm putting in this space is going to actually work on the mock-up and show up properly on the label.
Cool. Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that because that definitely gives us a lot more context as to the space we're trying to fill for the label. And so what is your priority when you're creating this label? Like, what do you think are the most important things, and how are you thinking through them?
Well, obviously logo needs to be like recognizable. I also want to highlight the fact that it's gluten-free. I did want to give a little bit of context, like this is an organic syrup brand, and this also like helps support that. And I also want to make sure that it is standing out amongst the other labels. So, I was thinking, what if I just did text and designs without any imagery? But most of the other syrup brands are using imagery, and I think that really helps also make it feel more legit. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm definitely going to incorporate some pancakes as well. And obviously, I want it to match the overall brand identity we've created thus far.
That makes sense to me. I think like a lot of people when they're shopping, they're visual shoppers. And so if you don't see that pancake stack, maybe you wouldn't be sure if it was syrup or not, right? Like you might think it's, I don't know, another ingredient or something, or something like foreign, like some other kind of drizzle, and then not gravitate towards it. So I think it's smart here what you're doing. And this little technique that you just did, what was that tool? And why do you use that one instead of anything else?
Yeah, so I just used the shape builder tool, and essentially what I did is take the pencil tool and just kind of made little squiggly lines, like a little teeny rough line here, this shape. And then I selected both this and that line I just created and used the shape builder tool to create a shape that wasn't actually there before. Now,
that looks really cool.
what I'm about to do is a little complicated, so I'm going to try to like talk through it. I'm going to put a clipping mask over these pancakes so that they fit on the label using Command 7. Okay. But I also want some of this to actually go over top of it. So what I'm going to do...
So you're playing here with like where the layers sit.
Send to back, and then I'm going to copy this, delete, send to back, and now I'm going to go grab these pancakes again, take them out of that clipping mask, put them here. Now I'm going to do another clipping mask over top. So just this portion of the edge of the pancakes is actually sticking out. So I'm using the pen tool to draw a shape. And now I'm going to use that as a clipping mask on these pancakes again. So now it gives the illusion that it's actually kind of sticking out.
Got it. Okay. And so the whole point of that, you guys, if you're like, why did that just happen, is to make sure that the drizzle, I'm calling it a drizzle, a spill, whatever you want to call it, is a little bit over the pancakes, but not over the entire stack, because you didn't want it crowding the butter. That's like the gem of the stack. So that wouldn't make any sense. So I think that made sense to me. It is a little complicated with all the different clipping masks, but it's definitely the best way to do it to keep everything like tight and clean and not breaking every time you move it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a ton of different ways to do that, obviously, but that was what seemed to be the easiest for me. And sometimes working with clipping mask, I'll get completely tripped up and have to start over. But I did practice that one yesterday, so I knew how to do it.
There you go, guys. Everyone needs a little practice sometimes when it's a little tricky, when you have so many different elements and you're trying to be really precise with your layering. We have a great question here from Tasha Cosper. Where do you normally find your mockups?
So I knew someone was going to ask that, but I don't know where this syrup bottle mockup actually came from. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was basically the only one available out there. But I have been really loving the Adobe stock mockups. I've been seeing some really high quality ones that I don't usually see other places. Creative Market is also a good place for like premium mockups, but I tend to find that a lot of those get overused or there's not as many unique ones. And then if you're looking for free mockups, there's a site called mockupworld.co, and they have a lot of really cool free ones that, have common things like business cards, packaging, things of that nature.
Amazing. Do you ever make any yourself? I know it can be like another step to the whole thing, but sometimes if there's not another one or there's not one available, have you ever made one yourself?
Yeah, but I will say I typically, when making them myself, I just stick to like the laptop, or like I'll take the photo of myself in my house and like do a mock-up with, the screen, because doing like rectangular square mockups are really easy versus something like this where there's a lot of shadows, a lot of highlights, a lot of different shapes, and I'm not a product photographer. So like I would always prefer to either have a product photographer take the photo and then have somebody else make the mockup and then me use it, because I want it to be high quality,
Right. There's definitely that. You're like, why would I hack this together when I can go buy one or get someone else to make one? So that makes total sense. I totally get that. The rectangle ones are definitely like you can pull off. I could totally see that, but it does get really complicated once you go to this bottle.
Okay, so now I'm going to paste the design I just created in Illustrator into the mockup, and I just double click the layer where the actual design is supposed to go. And I literally just use Command C to copy the design from Illustrator, and I just use Command V to paste it in here.
Nice.
Don't know why it's
so cool. That was so quick.
Anyways, maybe because those pancakes. Alrighties, let me get rid of this.
Now you got to place it. Oh, that looks amazing. That looks so good.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm gonna bring that text. I think
which text? The
text to the left right here, just over a tad. Other than that, I think it'll be fine. So always with the trial and error when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. When you work on any other product branding, do you usually print it out or go through anything like that?
Yeah, usually when I'm working with product-based clients, I've done like a client who had candles, who had like CBD oil bottles and things like that. I usually will actually ask them to ship me the products in the mail so that I can actually print the design I'm creating and put it on there and see what it looks like, because that really helps me get a better understanding of what I'm creating. Like if this was a legit client, I would probably go try to find a syrup bottle at the store that looks similar to the one my client's going to be using and actually print this out at home and stick it on there so I can really see what that looks like.
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes the even just like the size of things can seem totally normal when you're working digitally. And then suddenly you print it out and it's like, whoa, that pancake is too big or the text is too tiny, but you wouldn't know when you're working digitally because you're on a screen and you're zooming in and it kind of messes up with your judgment. So
Yeah, that's definitely happened before. And again, that's why I love being able to print stuff out and really analyze it that way because sometimes you just don't know. Like it looks totally good in the computer, and then you print it out and you're like, that's not how I intended that to look.
right. That feels wrong because it's just like a feeling that you get when you see it and it's just like a little off, even though it's the exact thing you already designed. So, what are you doing here now? What are you tweaking?
All right, so another very complicated situation here. So basically, as I was saying before, I could have designed the label to be like an entire rectangle, and you can actually see where it would typically fall.
Got it.
And these are the shadows and the highlights. But since I didn't do that, what I'm going to do is delete the shadow and highlight outside of the label. So basically, I'm going to take this little magic wand tool here and select my label design, and then I am going to, we need to select this as well. Hold on.
Select the whole thing.
Maybe I should, we'll try it like this and see what happens. All right, so now I'm going to hit select inverse, and then I'm going to go to shadows, the shadows layer, and I'm going to take my eraser, and instead of just hitting delete, I'm using this because if I hit delete, it will actually delete some of the text because that's selected as an inverse selection. So that's why I'm doing it this way.
Got it. Okay. Because you want to keep the other parts intact. Okay, that's looking good.
I think there is any down there. Is there, oh, there's some right there. Oh, I hate when I do that. It's like I don't lift up. Yeah, I don't lift up off the mouse. I do that all the time. Well, in Photoshop specifically.
It happens. I mean, because you're trying to work in like one swoop so you don't keep like going back and forth, trying to be efficient, and then it works against you.
I'm just going to use this tool since the pancakes are kind of in the way right there. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start over here, down here, there. That should, got a little bit of pancakes in there. Okay. So now.
Perfect. You just grabbed it. I was holding my breath for you. When you're working that, there. I feel like with those tools, you have to be very kind of precise. Otherwise, you have to start all over again.
Oh, yeah.
And did you just delete some of that highlight? Wait, is that still shadow or highlight?
No, I just switched over to the highlight layer. I was like, since I already have this selected, I'm just going to go ahead and do the highlight as well. Okay. Now I got to go do the same method for the highlights that I had done originally. The rest of the highlight.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Select inverse. And this is like also the like hard thing. Like usually there's more mockup options out there when you're working with other stuff. Like there probably would have been a mockup with a label design exactly like this for something else where I wouldn't have to be going back through and doing this.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to work with the mockup that you have and it requires a little editing. No problem though.
Exactly. I knew doing it probably be like this as well because I wanted to do something that I don't see often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely other mockups out there that'll give you like different options. They'll have like multiple versions, multiple light sources that then you can edit. So definitely if you're interested in working with mockups, don't be discouraged if you get a mockup that's like maybe not exactly for your purposes. You can either look for another one that's out there or edit it and just like with a little patience, get your mockups looking perfect.
And I don't have to be that precise.
Fine details. I feel like it looks good. I don't notice that.
It's solid enough. You're not going to be zoomed in that much. All right, now I am going to bring the shadows down just a little because I don't like how dark it is. Just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens when I mess with this here. Okay, I think I like the highlights. And then I would also like to give this some texture. So I'm going to go to the filter gallery. let's see. Okay, this is looking okay.
What texture is this? Just the texturizer? Is that what it says?
Yes, and then here you can select like different textures. I just have canvas selected, and you can actually change. I don't even know what this button does. Let's find out.
Whatever it is, it was subtle.
Yeah, like it's not really making that much. Okay, this looks fine to me.
And you added that just because it was looking a little too like slick, right?
Yeah, and you really can't even notice unless you zoom in, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe zoomed out, you'd have to make it a little more dramatic.
Yeah, let's increase it just a tad and see what happens. Let's do like 3.
I feel like I can tell that
Okay,
changed it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Still editing the lighting.
It's
getting it just right. You can see Kenzi here is a perfectionist. She's aiming for perfection with this mock-up. Let's see.
All right, I think that's good enough. So if we wanted to change the background let's go copy one of the colors from here. Let's see what it looks like with purple. Actually, I want to do the really light purple. This guy. So I'm copying the color code, going back in here, and then pasting that there.
Looks nice.
Now I feel like I could also incorporate maybe some of those little well, I don't know what they're called.
The droplets.
Yeah, the little droplet thingy things. So I'm just gonna take one at a time because I don't want them all grouped together.
Okay. And amazing question here from Mervin. The texture that you gave the label just now, will it be seen in the print also, or is it just for the mock-up?
Oh, this is purely for the mock-up. So just to provide a little bit more context, this is just like I would show my client, okay, this is what it could look like when you print it. But in reality, what they would be getting would be this. I would hand off this, just this right here, and they would go to the printer and then print it, and then they can pick, the paper type, paper quality, if they want it glossy, if they don't want it glossy, and whatnot.
Right. So the reason she added that texture in the mock-up was just to make sure that it looked like it was a printed on sticker as opposed to looking so much like a graphic mock-up, which is what it is. But you're trying to convince the client that you're selling the concept here, which is you can print this, put it on your put this label on your bottles, and it's going to look amazing. So that was just to make it a little more realistic.
Exactly. Okay. And I feel like mock-ups are like one of the biggest selling points when it comes to even something as simple as business cards.
Yeah, totally. Do you feel like when you present mock-ups, your clients just have a way easier time like agreeing to the brand identity or anything like that, or the design of the business card or whatever it may be?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just did business cards for a company the other day, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick all of these in mock-ups. I'm not even going to show them just the flat design, because I think sometimes as creatives, we forget that other people can't like visualize things the same way. So I always think it's really helpful to have mock-ups.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with you there. I think like we assume that everyone has this visual brain that can totally see it and understand how the end result's going to be just by seeing the design itself. But so many people that are hiring designers are hiring them because they're not that visually inclined, and they need to see it all kind of packaged together in a mock-up to really understand why maybe you made the type that size as opposed to giant, or why you have this hierarchy going, or the colors and all that kind of stuff. So I can totally see why mocking up all those business cards is almost like an easier way for you to work, even if it's an extra step.
Yeah, and I mean, long term, if the client can visualize it better, then you're going to have less work to do, because they're not going to be like, well, can I see it like this, or can I see it like this?
Exactly. So by doing that, it's a little extra work, but less work in the long run. We have here, while you're working on these little droplets, we have another question here from Tina Bergerson. Do you have any advice for someone new to design?
Watch YouTube tutorials and follow along with them. That was something that really, really helped me learn how to use all these tools.
Yes, I have to agree with that. Just watching other people work gives you a really better understanding of why people use certain tools, why they're working in one program instead of another. So definitely just tutorials, practice, and get your feet wet with some projects.
Okay, what do we think about this? Do we need to add another one down here? I don't know what.
Yeah, maybe we can add another. Well, how many do you have? 6? Yeah, definitely. I feel like odd numbers tend to just have a little bit more harmony. Maybe some of those other elements too.
Yeah, what about these dots? I didn't even think about the dots. Let's try that. Maybe fill that
space. It might help just like make it a little bit more unified.
Oh no, we've lost my dot.
You got stuck.
There we go. I hit Command T to select that and bring him back. All right, and then we need some solid dots as well. I feel like adding these like background elements also helps bring the mockup to another level, because like I could have just left it like standard, but yeah, this makes it more branded and fun, which is what I'm going for.
Exactly. It definitely just like explains to the client why you have these elements, what they're there for, and how everything can kind of be cohesive and play together. And you didn't just think about the label, you're kind of thinking of like the experience of this bottle. If you want to, word it like that to them, get flowery with it. Okay. Now, well, you can continue working on that. In the meantime, we have some more questions for you. I know yesterday you mentioned that you work using this one concept method where you present only one concept for brand identity to your clients when you're working with them, after obviously asking a lot of questions, talking to them, getting an understanding of what they want. We have a question here from Lisa Havlat regarding that one concept method. Do you ever have problems during the revision process? Are requests ever so extreme that you feel like they're asking you to start over? How do you limit those?
So honestly, no. And I think that's primarily because of how much questions I ask, how many questions, how much time I spend with them on the phone, getting to know their history, their story, their goals. Like that initial part is so important, because you really, really want to have a strong understanding of the overarching goals. So when you're creating this brand identity, you can understand their vision as well as their target audience, and also make sure you're selling the brand identity from a strategy point of view. Again, yesterday I talked about like sending over videos and talking about your process and the way you're thinking about things and how you develop things. That part is so important because the client really needs to understand that. And I also make the feedback questions very specific, like, how do you feel these design elements will resonate with your target audience? How do you feel these design elements can be approved upon for your target audience? So that way, when the client is actually giving me feedback, they're not just going crazy with it and going all over the place. They're really, really thinking about, okay, what's going to work for my target audience? They're not just thinking about, what do I like?
Exactly. Yes. I think, when we're talking about the one concept method, you also just have to remember that there's a lot of research and steps before you present the one single concept that will then kind of eliminate the need for so many revisions if you properly talk to your client, understand the brand strategy behind it. Just like Kenzi said, she's doing all of that before she even presents that one concept. So by the time she's there, she has a really strong understanding of what the client wants to avoid that pushback. So it's definitely something to consider. If you're getting a lot of pushback, maybe rethink your onboarding process, the questions that you're asking them, and kind of get the client on board with you so they can trust your one concept by the time you present it.
Yeah, and I think that another thing, sometimes people don't necessarily understand, the one concept method doesn't mean just sit there and develop one concept and move forward with that. It means explore different concepts until you get the strongest and present that one. Like today I started working on a new client project. It's actually on my stories on Instagram right now. If anybody wants to go look, I'm actually getting like a poll from everybody because I had made this icon and there's like 4 different variations of this icon with slight differences. And it's like, okay, guys, which one is your favorite? Because there's so many endless possibilities. So it really does take a lot of time and exploration to pick the strongest one before you move forward.
Exactly. That's a really good point to reiterate, Kenzi. You're not only making one concept, you're picking and presenting the best concept of the ones you made, to avoid having clients just get overwhelmed with so many options. You've already thought through these options and are presenting the one you think is the strongest. Now, a little reminder for those who are tuning in from YouTube. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Now come on over to Behance. Come to behance.net/Adobe Live. This way you can join the chat. You can talk to us. You can ask questions. It's just a better time over here. So come on over to behance.net/Adobe Live. Now, Kenzi, I see you're still here, adjusting, getting this background just perfect. What is working for you and what isn't?
Well, I think right now I'm getting overwhelmed with the dots. So there's that. So there's like a lot of, this is like the one thing that I feel like happens to me often when I incorporate a lot of elements like this. Sometimes it ends up like we're trying to fill the space and then we add a bunch and then it's like, wait, there's a lot here. So now I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need to add anymore. I just need to kind of place them
refine
differently.
Yes, yeah. It's very tough to kind of do that. I feel like that purple bottom left swoosh, maybe if you turn it, flip it over, so it kind of plays like, better with that yellow one. Do you know what I mean? Because you have that yellow one at the top.
Yes.
So if you have it kind of going, well, I was thinking you could just flip it. I forget like, that's the word, right? Like, flip horizontal.
Yeah.
Mirror it essentially. It might have a little bit more harmony with that yellow blob at the top. Blob. We're calling these things all sorts of names. But or you can just undo that. It's your design, Kenzi. Just giving a little suggestion as I see that you're working it. I'm also deeply invested.
Yeah, no, I love that idea because it gives that kind of line where your eyes kind of like from here to here instead of working
and back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Now, Voodoo Val in the chat has a great question here. Do you have any advice on client communication when they are holding onto a personal design choice that does not work for the brand itself?
Yeah, so I always, if I have a client who's like, I really want, and this is actually a real life example from the past, I had a client who was like, I really, really want, to use this brown color. And I went and pulled that brown color and I stuck it beside everything. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense color-wise because there's not enough contrast here. People aren't going to be able to read things. So I just did one slide for the client showing that color compared to the one I picked out. And I said, here's why this isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to actually read this if we use this color. You need to have enough contrast. And I think, that's just one situation. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that something may not be working, but I think when you kind of show them and come to a place of, again, strategy and like what's going to work either from a visual standpoint or from a strategic standpoint, they'll kind of come to their senses. And I also, before every single brand presentation I give to my clients, I actually say in the beginning of the presentation where I'm going over my initial strategy and thought process, I say, okay, before I move any further into this, please try to view this concept from the point of view of your target audience, since subjective personal opinions may get in the way of what's best for your brand. And I say that every single time, even during the refinements. So I'm always reminding them, think of a place that is going to work for your brand and your target audience, not what do you like.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible advice. Definitely, that is like the perfect answer for Val's question, because it might not be in the best interest of the brand for you to pick that color or to want that random symbol or illustration that has nothing to do with the brand. And reminding them of that kind of avoids them taking things a little personally when you say, that's not the best idea here, ma'am. So I think that's key to remind them. And you definitely are on point with that, setting them up for that as opposed to then backtracking from there. So that's a really good tip here from Kenzi, you guys. I'm definitely going to start using that. But You guys should too. Perfect. Now you're exporting that?
Yeah, so I'm exporting this just to kind of use it in our little presentation here. I'm also going to go back and export a PNG as well. This is just like, maybe this could be used for an Instagram post or something for my client.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Yesterday we were talking about all the different exports that you have to do when you're doing a brand identity project. Here's an example of just one. Now, we have another question here from Mervin Jedhav. Hey, Mervin, welcome back to the stream. Do you take suggestions of your designs from any of your design mentors? So maybe do you turn to them for any advice or feedback?
I really wouldn't say I have any mentors at this point in time. I will. So here's the thing that I do. I'll like look at something and be like, I'm not really sure which one I like, and I'll send it to somebody. And then after I send it, I look at it again and I'm like, I like this one. I don't know why I asked for their opinion, which that's just kind of where I'm at now, which I think a few years ago, I probably would have been more open to getting help, because I mean, I think a lot of times we'll be working on something for so long, we're like, does this even look good anymore? And the fact of the matter is it does look good. You just need to step away and come back and look at it again, and you'll know which one is like the best route.
I agree with that. Sometimes you just need to take a little bit of a break. You've been staring at the project for too long. You need to go get a coffee, go for a walk, come back to it, maybe even take a nap. And then you might be able to finally make that decision, because there's so many little decisions involved with design, as you can see Kenzi making here, that by the time you have to make a bigger decision, sometimes you can be a little bit overwhelmed, confused. You've already made some decision fatigue is what it's called. You've made so many decisions and now you don't know what's next. Speaking of what's next, what is next?
So now I am just going to place this PNG in here that I just created. So let's bring this down. Maybe here, actually, I'm going to use this again in another brand board. So I'm going to keep that here. But I think I'm actually going to put this fun one. And obviously this is a square, so it's not going to fit this entire area, but I have a way to fix this. So
can't wait to see.
Now that that's in there, I'm just going to make another rectangle back here and send that to the back. And now,
bang. Just like that, the whole page is covered. It fits seamlessly in there. And I think it looks so much better than just the blank, plain mock-up. You know, this one really feels like it's thoughtful part of the brand. You really put that effort in there, as opposed to just slapping it into a mock-up, which there's nothing bad with slapping stuff into mock-ups, you guys.
Yeah. Well,
if you need to.
Now that I've done this, you can kind of see the square shape because of the way the dots are aligned. So like in this instance, I'm just taking the actual elements that are still in Illustrator and just kind of spreading them out a bit more so that it doesn't have that
so it doesn't look so like within
squared.
The contained. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
And let me make sure this is the same size to make sure everything is consistent here. Okay.
Nice. Yeah. Now it looks a little bit more purposeful.
And I could even do, this one is not the same size. This one needs to be the same size.
That's that designer eye when you're like, no, you're off. You're off by a couple pixels. We got to change that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if everyone is this, like, I am so peculiar with like the placement of dots and things like this. I don't know if everybody is like this, but things like this definitely probably take up the majority of my time when I'm working on projects.
But I think it makes all the difference too, right? Because if you kind of didn't put in that attention to detail, then it wouldn't end up looking as like elevated and finished as it otherwise would look. So I think it's part of it all. I think you're doing it for a reason, Kenzi. Makes sense to my brain. I've had art directors who are very particular. They can be like, that's off by a pixel, push it. And you're like, whoa, wow, that is a really fine-tuned eye. How do you feel like your eye is with like detecting the size of things and where things need to be? Do you feel like you can nail the size of something even without being like particular about it?
Yeah, a
like
lot of
measuring
times,
it?
yeah, I've actually surprised myself. Like, I'll just kind of estimate things sometimes, and then I'll actually like print it out or like put it in whatever I was trying to like guess the sizing for, and it'll be like exact. And I'm like, wow,
It's
I
all
just
up
did that with my,
here.
usually with like the spacing between maybe a logo and then like the tagline below it. I'll just kind of eyeball it. Whoops. I'll just kind of eyeball it before I actually measure it. And then when I go back and measure it, I'm like, I had that exactly right without even measuring it.
That's when you know you're like you've been in the project for a long time now, right? It's like ingrained into you, the spacing of everything. I love it though, and this is looking amazing. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I could keep going on that, but we're just gonna
You're
do
like, we're
one
just
more
gonna
and
move
then
on, and then you like keep adding.
okay. It's okay. It's good enough. It's just for that. It's fine. It's fine. Okay.
Okay.
That over there. Let's do now if this was a legit client project, I would sit here and paste out every single color code, but for the fact that this is not an actual client project, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put some
You're just
colors
gonna
here.
show the colors, but usually you include like the hex codes.
Yes, that would be included over there.
Are there any other codes that you include? I know yesterday we got some questions about it, so just want to clarify for anyone tuning in today what you include in terms of color palette.
Yeah, so a lot of times I just include the hex codes. Now, again, if I'm in a unique situation working with a client who I know is going to need those Pantone colors, or I know they're going to be working in a lot of like CMYK or something, then in that situation, I would provide, extra color codes and such. But again, a lot of my clients are strictly online, so I really don't have to worry about doing that quite often.
There you go, you guys. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It really depends on the kind of client that you're working with, how much detail you need to provide. I definitely wouldn't provide Pantones if you don't need them. Or maybe they can just, it's an extra charge, right?
And I mean, a lot of designers do, but honestly, it takes so dang long. I'm like, if they don't need them, I'm good. I
I'm
don't feel like
gonna
doing
take
it.
back my time there. Yep. I I feel that. I feel like that's fair. That's fair if they're never going to use them. While you're working there, we have another question here from MJ. You've been involved in Kenzi. Have you been involved in the branding part where you have to take care of whether the marketing team uses the design assets consistently? So this is a hot topic, as I know. Once you hand it off, well, how much responsibility do you take after that?
Oh yeah, so for the most part, I mean, I don't offer marketing services, right? So like I do the branding, do the website, I hand off the guidelines, and I give my client everything they need to stay consistent, but it's up to them to ensure that they're following those guidelines and their team is also following their guidelines because like we can give our clients everything they need, but at the end of the day, we can't always make them follow those guidelines. So, I've had clients who like follow their guidelines religiously and do really, really well after I send over everything, and they're really good with cohesion and consistency. And then I've had other clients who do not follow what I've given them, and their Instagram feed looks like a hot mess. And, I don't say anything because we're done working together. And again, at the end of the day, it's up to them. And I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not going to be like, you aren't following your guidelines, but it's up to them. Like they have what they need. If they don't want to follow them, it's whatever.
That's on them for sure. Maybe that's like a follow-up service, right? You could offer a 1-year follow-up, but that would be up to them if they want that kind of thing. And sometimes if they just don't want to stick to it, what are you going to do? You can't force someone. You've done your part. It's up to them. What's the worst thing that you've seen? Or it's okay if you don't want to answer that. You can answer ambiguously.
I love questions like this. Like, okay, by worst thing I've seen, what do you mean by like handing off to a client and then not following the guidelines, or like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean like a client, yeah, you created their brand identity, you handed it off, and then they've just committed a crime essentially against the brand identity. Let's stick to that since that was part of the question.
Yeah, so I had this one client, they have a physical product, which makes me very upset because the product box and the product looks amazing, And then their Instagram feed and the website is trash. I didn't do the
Uh,
website. They DIY'd everything. And like, some people, they don't have the budget to do the whole shebang. I understand that, but this person had the budget. They just didn't want to. They just didn't want to invest in their website. And then I gave them the reusable social media post. I showed them how to use it. And some people are just very out of tune with design. And this individual just didn't even understand like basic alignment. Like your text needs to go in the center of this shape and, stuff like that. So their Instagram feed, they're using all these different fonts that aren't in their brand identity, the shapes and the Instagram posts that I've created for them. If they have like text that's longer than the space there, instead of moving it and realigning it, it's just like going off the edge of the post, and it's terrible.
oh my gosh. I feel like I hit a sore spot, you guys. Wow, that is hard. That is hard to see that happening to your baby, essentially, right? Because you spend so much time creating these brands, and then you see them like just not living their best life, right? That's really hard. That's a tough place to be. And yeah, some people just don't know what's good for them in terms of following the guidelines. And what are you going to do? You can't force them. It's their brand.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, it sucks because it's like they invested all this time and energy and money into their branding, but they're not actually implementing it properly. So they're not really going to get results.
right, right. And that definitely impacts then like the value they see in the design, right? Because they're not using it properly, they're not seeing the results they wanted, and they might think they're not seeing the results because the branding isn't good enough, as opposed to the way you're implementing the branding is flawed. So that's a really hard line to balance.
I will say there is a few people who I know that are like social media managers who like do create content, and I have, referred clients to these people and been like, you take your guidelines I've created and you give them to this person, and they'll be really good about following them and make sure everything stays consistent. But I think a lot of people just DIY it, and then that's where they either get lazy and they don't want to follow the guidelines, or they want to try something new, or they're like, ooh, look at this Canva template. Let me try that, even though it has nothing to do with their brand, and they don't even bother to change the font to their brand font. So it happens.
It does happen. It does happen. I mean, yeah, people have different kind of priorities sometimes. They just want to have fun with it, and then they forget all about the guidelines that you created. So it's definitely a really tricky part of handing off your designs and your branding. Kenzi, going back here to the project, can you explain to us what you're doing, why, and how?
Yeah, so what I'm doing here is creating like a rough mock-up of an Instagram feed. So like, here's the kind of imagery that this brand should be using. Here's how they can use their colors. And I wanted to add like a cool little background just to make it more luxe feeling in a way, instead of just having like a solid white background. But I am trying to figure out if I want to do this a dark color or if I want to do this a light color. Don't know.
Yeah, that's tricky though, because you have a lot of light color, so you probably want a little more contrast.
Yeah, and then I'm like, well, you can't even see that purple good. Let me go even darker and see what happens here. Okay, that's good enough.
I'm into it. You could also try reducing the opacity of the photo itself, but I don't know if that's going to help or not.
Okay,
you really don't know until you're there. And Kenzi's just using the opacity tools right here in Illustrator with a shape on top with a little color. I'm not sure that made a huge difference, but
okay, now I'm grouping these because I want to actually spread these out just a tad more. And since they're grouped, I'm just going to select them and then do align to selection and make sure they're all even. Now I'm going to group the whole thing and center it again. I'm going to ungroup all of it so I can edit these things.
I love doing that. I feel like those alignment tools are so handy. I'm constantly grouping and ungrouping to be able to use them how I want. They're like kind of essential to my process.
All right. So let's see here. Maybe they can have like an informational post or something, or maybe just like a fun, this could be a reel cover.
Got it. Okay. So you're imagining like what kind of content they would be posting as well.
Yeah, so like I think that's also like something that like gets complicated nowadays because before it would be like, oh, you just make these like square posts, and now it's like you're making a square post, but it also has to fit the 9 by 16 reel cover requirements, and you have to think about, okay, what's that going to look like in the actual feed?
Yes, there's so many dimensions now to consider when you're thinking about social media assets. There was a time when everything was like horizontal and square, and now it's like horizontal, square, vertical, vertical with a crop. Like you said, it has to be able to make sense as just a grid post. It's so complicated now. Do you have templates in place for this that you refer to, or how are you working through all of those different size needs?
Yeah, so I actually, for my clients, for the most part, I don't really have any templates I use. Like everybody's different. But I will say that for my own feed, I do typically do the same exact thing every single time, which is basically where I take like I have this like 9 by 16, and then I plan out my feed kind of like I'm doing here. And once I have whatever I want in the square, I'll just take it over to that 9 by 16 and increase the size. I actually have a whole YouTube video about it because I plan out my entire Instagram feed inside of Illustrator because I find it so easy to like visualize it that way instead of using something like just Planoly alone.
Right. Yeah, that's really, really a cool way to think about it because then you're kind of designing the grid and then back designing the sizes that you need to make sure that they fit properly in that grid layout. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I can totally see why Illustrator would be really handy because some of those other apps are too rigid, especially like if you are so proficient in Illustrator that it's like, why would you use anything else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for people who maybe aren't as proficient, I assume that something else would definitely be better. But for me, I pretty much use Illustrator for almost everything, even when I probably shouldn't be using Illustrator.
That's funny. I'm curious in the chat, drop a blue heart if you're team Photoshop and a yellow heart if you're team Illustrator. I know people feel very passionate about which program they lean on the most. I would have to say, I think I'm team Photoshop. It's just my go to with illustration and all that kind of stuff. Kenzi's clearly Illustrator. Let's see what you guys have to say. And Kenzi, where are you still working on those grid posts? What are you working on next?
Yes. So now I'm just kind of looking at like, okay, what can I fill these squares here with? And make sure it's also representing the brand. So obviously I have this text here, but I want to add something that signifies this is Juliana's syrup.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Cool.
like, maybe I could bring a brand mark down here. Maybe it could go right here, and then this text could be below it. So in a real situation, if this was a real client, I would make these and then I would upload the assets to Canva and make sure that this is Canva compatible. Typically, because most of my clients don't know how to use the software. I will have rare occasions where I'll have clients who do know how to use the software, typically like photographers or something. But if they don't, I will upload these assets to Canva to make sure they can easily go in there and reuse the branding social media posts that I've created.
Interesting. I totally get what you mean. Yeah, that way you're kind of eliminating the need for them to learn an entire new program. I wonder if you've tried Adobe Creative Cloud Express. It's like kind of similar and maybe would be easier. I'm not sure if it has those capabilities, but could be something to look
I
into.
actually haven't, but I will definitely look into it now. There's so many programs that I have not even tried because it's like, again, I just love Illustrator so much. It's like,
Yes, yes. And you do want to stay in the world that the client prefers. So if it's Canva, then so be it. And you're still creating everything else how you want. Um, we have another amazing question from MJ. How different will your design strategy be for a personal branding project, like for someone's personal brand, or something more corporate?
So I will say I don't really work with a lot of corporate businesses because that's just not my jam. I don't really enjoy it. Personal brands I find a lot easier to work with because usually people with like personal brands have already kind of started building their following. So I can literally go in there and like see, the type of audience they have, the goals they have, what type of content they're creating. Whereas with corporate branding, it's more like you have to take into account the whole team. You have to take into account the business. It's not really such a personal approach. So I think there's a totally different way of doing the research for that. And I find personal brands to be way more fun and probably a bit easier at times, to be honest.
That makes sense. It is like a different kind of world to do. And if you don't have fun creating that kind of work, it's like you're your own business owner. Why go that way? Why go in that direction? So I totally get what you mean. And I hope that answers your question, MJ. And shout out to everyone in the chat who's dropping yellow hearts, blue hearts. There's a lot of love for both Illustrator and Photoshop happening in the chat right now. Okay, so while you keep working, is there one more post that you're gonna create?
Yeah, I need something to go on this yellow one.
Maybe like a pancake recipe. Does that
Oh, good idea.
right? They might have like
Great idea.
they might have a sister product, and you can then use that, make it very quick 3-step kind of thing. Okay, so while you're working on that, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions here, Kenzi. Hopefully not too distracting, but I think stuff that everyone wants to know. So yesterday you mentioned that you launched your business while you were still in school. And after you graduated, you're self-employed, you have your own business. What made you choose to do that as opposed to working, let's say, in-house as a designer somewhere?
So I guess you could say I got kind of bitter about people taking credit for my work. I don't know what that started to stem from, but I realized like if I were to go work for an agency, like we had a lot of field trips at the design school. So like we got to go see how these agencies worked, and like I saw all these people like doing this magnificent work, but they're not really getting the credit for it at the end of the day. It's branded under the agency, or if the agency is branded under a person's name, that's who really gets all the credit. And I was like, if I create work, I want to be the one getting recognition for it. And I'm still like that to this day. Like if somebody reaches out to me about white label work, I'm like, no, I won't do it because I want my name on the work. And then I think another part of it outside of that was the fact I realized the freedom you get with being your own boss and being able to kind of make your own schedule and choose what you want to work on and what clients you want to work with. And that's something you don't really get to do if you're working under an agency. It's more like they hand you the clients. And sometimes if you go work somewhere where it's like all focused on one brand, you're always doing the same type of stuff. And I love working with all sorts of different types of businesses. It keeps my creativity flowing and I'm constantly challenging myself. And I feel like if I was in like a corporate environment, that wouldn't happen. And I hate waking up to an alarm. So that's also like reason number 3.
Wow. She's got 100 reasons why she stuck with being her own business, being an entrepreneur. It makes so much sense. I can totally see what you're saying, especially when you're fresh out of school. Like those agencies, you end up maybe working for a client for years before you get transferred to another client. So it could be years of working on something that you don't love, right? And you just have to keep creating for them because that's your job. So I think it makes a lot of sense. But if that's what you want to pursue, that's also totally fine. There's plenty to learn in those settings. But I'm sure Kenzi has learned so much as her own business owner. What do you think, now that you've been doing this for some years now, are the pros and cons of running your own design business?
Yeah, so I'd say pro. I mean, there's so many things about running your own business that are amazing. Some being, again, your own schedule. You get to pick out the clients. You can take a break when you want to take a break. Like if I want to go on vacation, I can go on vacation whenever I want. I don't have to request time off, whatever. So I basically get to do what I want to do whenever I want every day, with the exception I have to make sure I'm getting client work done, and every now and then I have calls and such. And I also don't have to under an agency or working for somebody, you also sometimes, I think this is becoming less of a typical thing nowadays, but it still happens all the time where you have to watch what you post on social media. You have to watch what you say if you have a boss, because that can affect you. And since I'm my own boss, I can post whatever I want. I can talk about whatever I want, and I can really voice my opinion. And for me, that's actually been like a huge way that I've gotten clients, is that clients resonate with not only, the work I'm doing, but me as a person. And I love being able to work with people who understand me as a person, because that just makes the project even better. And we get to create awesome stuff together because we understand each other.
That makes a lot of sense. That plays into your personal brand, right? That's your personal brand voice. And if you were working for, let's say, just a big agency, you would have to stifle maybe some of your brand voice because, you can't maybe speak out against the clients that you guys have at the agency, or criticize, or, kind of be too critical of things because you are working as a part of a bigger brand. So that is a really, really valid point to make here. And it makes a lot of sense that you've been able to get clients who kind of vibe with your voice, aside from just your personal branding and your design style.
I will say, in terms of things that boundaries, which we kind of talked about yesterday, having to make sure you're setting boundaries with clients. Other things, taxes, having to deal with that. When you're working for somebody else, you don't really have to worry about that area in the same way that a self-employed individual does. And then also marketing. Like, the thing about being your own boss is that you have way, way more work than you would working a 9 to 5. So like, I have to be the one to get up and create content to attract new clients and get my business out there. No one else is going to do that for me. Whereas if you're working for somebody else, you kind of only have one main task. You go to work, you do that task, and your day is over. And I think that's something people really don't understand about self-employed individuals. Like, most of us work a lot, and it's not just because like we want to work all the time. It's because working for yourself, as rewarding as it is, it's also a lot more work most of the time than having a normal 9 to 5.
I can definitely see that being a downfall. Yeah, it's like, even though you're super passionate about your design business, you're still playing way more roles than just being the designer that's a part of a bigger team. Once again, at an agency or at a company or something like that, everything comes down to you and how much effort you put into your own business, which comes with its own struggles. Can you give us a little recap of what you're creating right now here in the brand identity process?
Yeah, so now that we've kind of got the basics down, we've got like the brand marks, I accidentally moved the third one down there. Oops, gonna have to go get that. Anyways, we've got the brand marks, got the brand pattern, got the mock-up done. We're kind of just refining things and finalizing it. So by that, I mean, I'm about to put this here so you can see the logo alongside like syrup on pancakes. Like, what does it look like in context? I'm going to put a little like mashup of things here working together. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about placement strategy, because I think that a lot of people have doubts about this brand, maybe because it's so different than what you typically see. And I want to explain a little bit more about my thought process there. And so we're really just finalizing everything, getting close to being done with this.
Yes, I can't wait to see that. I've never seen someone talk about placement strategy before, so I'm eager to get that information. And now you're using that gradient tool. Ooh, or are you?
Yes.
Question mark.
Yes.
Okay.
So I put the logo right here, and this is over top of it, so you may not, it's back there, but it was kind of just slightly hard to see. So I wanted to do a gradient from the right to the left so that you can kind of see that, and it, the pancake kind of sticks out as well to the left of there. I didn't want to cover that up.
Nice. That looks so slick. And that gradient really does add so much more than just like sticking it on there. I'm into it. That's a cool trick.
Save this. Always got to save progress.
Yes. Always save. That's another pro tip here. We have this question while you're working here. Another one from MJ. Do you think it's better to showcase clients through a website portfolio or a PDF portfolio?
Like showcase finished client work?
I would assume so, yeah.
Oh, definitely a website, without a doubt. Like, I think A thing that a lot of freelancers do when they're starting is they just use like Google Drive or they just use something like that. And for a lot of people, when they're looking for a designer, they want to be able to go to your website and kind of look things through on their own time. And it also seems a bit more credible than maybe just sending a link to a Google Drive folder or something of that sort. So I always encourage designers to get their own custom websites made, make it branded, make it stand out, because it's going to help you in terms of credibility, but also SEO, like getting found organically. If you're just using Google Drive or a PDF, you're not going to have that advantage.
I have to agree with you, Kenzi. I think you're making such great points here. Yeah, SEO is like critical. And if you just have a PDF, that's not going to pop up. And so it gives you just like another experience, another way for people to connect with your work. And if your website is really cool, like Kenzi's website, which she showed us at the beginning of the stream, that's also going to speak volumes too, like of how her own website experience is for the client.
Yeah, and I think it's as a designer, I mean, I have rebranded, I believe, 4 times. So, like, we're always changing and evolving. And, like, I'm so proud of my website now. But, a year and a half ago, I hated my website. It felt like it didn't reflect the quality of work that I did. And I really had to set aside time to redesign my entire website to make sure it was actually reflecting me and the stage that I was at in business. So I think it's always good to like also revisit that stuff every so often to make sure your website, your social media, the content you're creating is reflecting the quality of work you're doing and the type of clients you want to attract at that point in time.
That is another, yeah, that's like key part of maintaining your website is like, is it still doing your work justice, right? Because sometimes you can outgrow your own branding and your own website just because you start getting bigger and bigger clients, or you start moving in one direction. Like you start working a lot with pancake syrup brands and all you have on your website is jewelry brands or something like that, right? You'd want to update your site, update your branding to match. Kenzi, what are you creating here on this slide here?
So this is what I refer to as a brand board. So basically I'm just putting some of the design elements together and showcasing how it looks when they're alongside each other.
Beautiful. That's really smart. I haven't seen that before, but I think it definitely will help the client understand like how all these elements play together throughout the brand identity. Another question for you, Kenzi, while you're working on that. I know you've mentioned this before, you don't do one-off logo designs, right? So how do you explain the value of getting an entire brand identity design made to those clients who just say, can you do a quick logo? Can you make this drawing into a logo for me? Or whatever the case may be.
So usually I don't explain it and I'm just like, I don't do that. But that's because I got tired of explaining it so much that I was like, you know what? They can go to my website. I spent hours building it. It has all the answers. They can learn about why I don't do one-off logo design. And I get a lot of DMs like that who are like, create a logo for me. And ultimately at this point in my business, I don't have time to respond to those people and explain that I don't do that. If they were really interested in working with me, they would visit my website and find that information out prior to inquiring. So I think there's that element of things. And if I do feel like actually explaining it, I'll say, hey, I don't do one-off logos by themselves. I only do logos inside of brand identity packages. And I believe that every business needs a brand identity to successfully show up consistently and cohesively and attract their ideal target audience. Here's my services page on my website that explains all about that. And if that's not something you're interested in, I completely understand. And that's pretty much the end of it. And most of the time, I don't hear back. And that's why I kind of stopped explaining that, because a lot of the people who are looking for one-off logos are not ready for the investment that a brand identity requires in the first place.
Got it. So even just by asking that question in and of itself, they are filtering themselves to the no pile, right? To the projects you're not planning on taking, because they clearly didn't even read your website, didn't even understand the kind of level of services that you're offering. I think that's really smart. And there are people who maybe need those, but they're not for you. So going on that for a little bit, what is one thing you wish everyone knew about logos before asking to get one designed? Like, is there something you wish clients understood better before entering into the process with them, even if they are working on a bigger brand identity project?
I think, I mean, and this goes back to the entire creative industry as a whole, but I wish people would first off do their research and understand what branding is. I mean, there's so many people out there who still don't understand it, and they just think, oh, I just need this logo made and I'll be set, and it's going to cost like $20. Like, they don't take it as a serious investment. So I wish more people would take time out of their day to research what logo design is, why you need it, how it, flows into branding. What is branding? Because in my eyes, if you're somebody who's really building a serious business, you're going to want to sit down and research that stuff, and you're going to want to know that stuff because it seriously impacts the success of your business. And I also wish that more people would come to the realization that pricing is all over the place. Like, there's people charging $5 for logos, and there's people charging 20,000 plus, and it really all varies based on, the person you're working with, their skill set, what the client needs, and all sorts of different things. And I think sometimes people go in it with a mindset of, okay, this is probably going to be like $500. I actually have gotten really rude inquiries before. I'll just go ahead and share one I got the other day. I do state in my inquiry form what my investment starts at, and I say, are you ready for this investment? Because I don't want people wasting their time reaching out to me if they can't even afford my services. We don't need to get on a call if they're not there yet. So I do say upfront what the investment is. And this person put, are you serious, in the answer box, instead of saying like yes or no. And I do have people who say no as well. And I'm like, my services start at that. Like,
like, yeah, if you press no, then don't hit submit. Like,
and like sometimes I'll be like, hey, I noticed that you put no here. That's what all of my services start at. I'm happy to refer you to someone else. Like, I'm always more than willing to refer people to other designers who aren't charging the same rates as me. But if you're going to be rude about it, I'm not going to work with you. Like, I responded to that person, and it was really hard to respond in a professional manner without getting an attitude, because like that was just rude and uncalled for. But I was like, hi there, I'm not really sure if we're a good fit since you put, are you serious, in my investment question box. I'm more than happy to refer you somewhere else if, my services aren't in your budget range at this point in time. Let me know. And that's all I said. And they never responded.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely pricing is, like you said, all over. People have like the wrong idea, or, it's fine if you have a smaller budget, but then you just need to get a smaller budget designer, or DIY it, or, do something else to stick in your budget, but to stick within your budget, but you don't have to can't expect experienced designers to want to work for you at a lower budget. That's like, you would never go to a store and be like, well, I can't afford it, so give it to me for less.
Yeah, well, let's also talk about people asking for free work. I'm sure you probably already know how I feel about that.
I do know, but I mean, it's not crazy to dislike people asking for free work. I mean, in what industry is that welcomed? I feel like sometimes because it's a creative industry, design, people think like, oh, you just do it for fun, therefore you should do it for free. But this is a profession. Look how much like technical skills you have. Not everyone knows how to use these programs, pay for the programs, all of that kind of stuff. So why would it be for free?
Yeah, and sidebar, I think I'm going to go back to the secondary logo because I hate it.
I was seeing you play with it, and I wasn't going to say anything because I was like, I don't know where she's going here. But what are you thinking you're going to do to this secondary logo? We made this yesterday, you guys, if you missed it. But now Kenzi wants to rethink it.
I don't know, maybe something with just like this, still almost like this, but without the like swirl things. I just hate it. I don't know. I just hate it. So, So I feel like this is giving like this secondary logo is honestly giving like SpongeBob vibes. Like
SpongeBob vibes.
it does though. Like I feel like Squidward and like the SpongeBob jellyfish right here. So I don't know, something needs to happen here. Maybe I could add a tagline here that's like gluten-free or all organic.
Right. Yeah. Organic makes sense since that's kind of something consistent through the branding. And yeah, sorry about that little dog interruption, you guys. She felt the need to protect, but it's all good. I think organic makes sense. I feel like that's what's coming through in all the different like elements, So
Yeah, and maybe I can bring this P down just to kind of do something a little different and match the end of that little organic right there. Let's see. Okay. But yeah, going back to the free pricing thing, I think that it is completely offensive. I don't care how nicely people ask. I think it is so offensive. And it's just like you don't walk into any other business and be like, hey, can you do this work for free? And it blows my mind that people think that that is acceptable to do to creatives, and even people defending people who were asking for free work. It's like that is offensive. Like it's just insensitive to even have the audacity to ask someone who makes a living from their craft to do free work.
Yeah, because it just takes so much. You're paying for someone's expertise, your eye, your vision. Like it's so much more than just using the program, right? Because anyone can open these programs and try and make a logo themselves. But if you don't have the skills to understand what makes a good logo, it just, yeah, I totally agree with you, Kenzi. I think, people have some nerve, but what can you do but just stick to your guns? Okay. I think this secondary branding, the secondary logo is looking a lot more put together than the first idea we had. Yeah. By we, I mean you.
Well, I feel like we kind of crafted that one together for sure. So let's see here. Okay, let's make sure this is centered. Okay, now, do we want to keep it square? Do we want to, I don't even know what this is, but sometimes, you just make marks.
See little options. Yeah. I think that could work, maybe with a little bit more spacing around it. Yeah.
I almost want to try one more shape and see, like, what if the top, is there a way for me? Okay, I'm going to do a triangle again.
Okay.
A rectangle, not a triangle. Okay.
It happens on the stream here. You start mixing up your shapes. Everything's everywhere. This is a live stream, you guys. If you're just tuning in from YouTube, come on over to Behance, behance.net/Adobe Live. And if you're just now joining us, we're here with Kenzi Green as she is working on a brand identity design in Adobe Illustrator. So you didn't like that the half moon shape?
No, we already used it for the
circle
brand mark with the pancakes. So I think I can actually stick to this one and it'll be okay.
Okay.
Which, yeah, we're just gonna do that because this is too SpongeBob.
Too much going on there.
Too SpongeBob-y. So let's go here, bring this down. And the one thing I really like about this one, opposed to the one we had previously, is that this can work in a completely solid color, whereas the other one had that little blotchy thing behind it, and I usually don't like doing stuff like that because it can't work in a solid color when you do that.
Right. Let's see here what happens. That looks cool.
Let's try this one like all dark. Oops, what just happened here?
Okay, while you're tweaking that secondary logo mark, what would you say, do you have any tools for staying motivated as a designer? Even you're doing client project after client project, how do you stay like motivated and inspired?
Yeah, so I actually get asked that question quite often, and the really simple answer is I do not stay motivated all the time, but my method is, if I have something that I need to turn in, I know I have client work, I just need to sit down and force myself to start working on it. And usually within the first 5 minutes, I'll start having fun and then just get motivated again. And that's really what I've done a lot lately. I mean, especially like this week, I've just been so busy with the Adobe Live event and everything. So this morning I sat myself down and I was like, I need to start working on this client project, started working on it. And now I'm like, this is amazing. This looks freaking awesome. I'm having so much fun. So I think a lot of times it can also just boil down to like having self-discipline.
Right. You can't just wait for inspiration and motivation to strike. You have to get the wheels in motion yourself. And hopefully, motivation and inspiration comes. Even if it doesn't, like you said, you still have client deadlines you got to push through. But a lot of the times, once you get started, you find it to be a lot easier. I think that is some really good words of advice from Kenzi. You got to get in there, start working. Don't just wait for inspiration to strike, which I think can be like a struggle for a lot of creatives when you're just like, I don't feel inspired by it. It's like inspired by the client, baby.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes there will be projects where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But again, I just sit myself down. And sometimes I think, even when I'm feeling uninspired, I think sketching, because I don't sketch for every single project, but sometimes that can also really help me get ideas if I'm feeling like unmotivated and really struggling to come up with stuff.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense because that gives you like a different starting point. And sometimes when you sketch, it's you don't feel as like precious with it as when you open up the softwares and start getting really precise from the get-go. Oh, I like this orange version. That's really fun.
Yeah, I noticed that. I feel like I've made a hard color palette to work with, but that's okay. I think I've noticed that I really like these orange, the orange on the like cream, because it has so much contrast. And I could probably even do like a blue one here. Let me try that. Let's move this guy over and then do one of the other
version.
colors.
Yes. Yeah, start integrating some of those other fun brand colors. Nice.
Yeah, there we go. And it's like, this color palette, it looks nice here. Like, it looks good there and it looks playful. But then when you start using it in other contexts, it's like, okay, this is a little hard to work with.
Totally. You don't know until you start working with it. We have a great question coming in here from Tasha Cosper. Do you have any suggestions to help prevent burnout?
Make sure you are taking breaks and setting boundaries for yourself, which, I mean, I know that can be kind of hard at first, but I feel like after your first year or so freelancing or, being self-employed, you'll kind of start to learn what your limits are, like how much you can take on at one time, how many clients you can work with. And I feel like you can tell when you're starting to get burnout because you'll just start feeling very tired or feeling overwhelmed a lot. And when you start feeling like that, I think it's very important to try and space things out. And I actually was feeling like that earlier on in this week. And it just so happened that one of my clients was like, hey, can we push back the date by a week? And I'm like, yes, that'll be perfect because I'm very busy. And I've also made, an effort to both of these days I did the 2-hour lives here. I am taking time away from the office and just completely stopping work after these lives and going outside and just like hanging out away from my computer, away from my phone all evening, and really giving myself space away from the work environment and the creative environment.
That makes a lot of sense. You have to kind of understand what your work days look like and kind of structure your life around them. So if you have a heavy workload, then have a chill evening. If you have a light day, space things out. It can be fun. That's a really good advice here from Kenzi. You have to learn your own boundaries and stick to them. What's going on here, Kenzi? Going back into the project, what are you working on?
Yeah, so I think that I am going to now, since we're kind of getting close to the end here, I'm again going back and like refining things. Like I had changed that secondary logo, so I'll need to update this. And I also want to make sure these brand marks are looking cutesy, like as cutesy as possible. And right now they were just kind of randomly strewn on there. So
sitting there. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Just to give you a little heads up, we have about 6 minutes until we move into the Adobe Artist Spotlight. You guys, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for it, but we're not there yet. I just wanted to give you a little heads up. A question I have here for you. I know we're completing this entire branding project in just 4 hours total, but how long do your branding projects usually take? Just so people have an understanding of the real life versus the live stream version.
Yeah, so typically my brand identity projects last at least a month. Um, and like this one, I mean, there's still things that if this were a real client project, I would probably spend more time like refining, like, the little, where were we working? These things, like I'd probably spend more time refining those little dots and like how it looks. And I'd go back and have like the text color codes and all of that. So, like, although we are going through this pretty fast in a typical general sense, if I was working with an actual client, there would be a lot more time spent on the finer details. And, sometimes it can last 2 weeks. And those are like the rare situations where I design the brand identity and hand it over to the client and they're like, it's amazing, let's move on. That doesn't
Got
happen that
it.
often, but like it does happen. And when that happens, obviously things move way faster.
It's good to know, you guys. Just wanted to give you some little context there. And then, how many branding projects do you work on at a time since you run your own design studio? I'm curious how many you're balancing.
Yeah, so right now I think I have about 5 clients, but one of those clients is actually just a website project. So it can really vary depending on like where I'm at in the project. If I booked out people in advance and a project runs a little bit over the timeline from the previous start date. So it can get a little mixed up. It really boils down to like where the project timelines are falling, how fast we're moving, who I have booked in advance, and what type of projects I'm booking as well. Like, again, this goes back to understanding your limits. So, like, if I have a client inquire with me between now and like next month, I'm probably going to say I'm not booking until late July because I have so much work coming down the pipeline and I'm so busy. And I want to make sure I'm giving myself that space.
That makes sense. Yeah, you have to think ahead and keep all your client, once you have those projects booked, keep their time in mind as you move forward. You can't say yes to everything all of the time. But it's really cool to know that you're balancing like roughly 5 projects at a time. That's so many different brands. I'm sure everyone in the chat is very impressed and eager to themselves have that many clients that they're working on. This is looking way more cutesy, as you said. Definitely feels a little bit more polished than just the 3 floating on the screen. I'm into it.
And something I also like to do here with these is also add some imagery as well, just to kind of, again, bring in more context. So let's see here. I could use this pin. Let's try this guy. I didn't even use this image here. This is such a cute photo.
Definitely. Where'd you grab these photos from, by the way?
This one's from Adobe stock. A
Cool.
lot of them did come from Adobe stock, and I did get a few from Pexels as well. That's like a free commercial use photo website that I often use in projects, especially with clients who maybe don't have brand photos done and they don't have anything to work with. That's when I will turn to Pexels, and I do let them know, I recommend everybody doing their own brand photos, but if that's not an option, I will use free stock photo resources, but it's going to be limited and it doesn't help you stand out.
Right. That's a really, really valid point to make. Wow. Yeah. It's really cool to see that you are kind of suggesting how they can elevate their brand beyond just the design and how, because ultimately the photography will influence how good the design ends up looking if all of the photos on the Instagram page are stock photos instead of custom brand photography. It's definitely not going to make the branding, it's not going to help the branding itself. So that's
Yeah,
really cool that you're
exactly.
thinking through that. One final question here before we probably have to move into the artist spotlight in like 2 minutes here. But Voodoo Val has a really good question here. How do you keep those projects from looking similar when you're working on them at the same time?
So it's pretty easy to do because I work with such a variety of clients. Like right now, I'm working with a depression clinic. I'm working with a soda brand, Jolly Good Soda, out of Wisconsin. Some of you may be familiar. They're like a legend in that state. They have a long history. So, and they're very, very bold as opposed to the depression clinic I'm working with. Totally different vibe, totally different approach,
Right.
totally different market. And then I'm also working with someone who is in the childcare education space. And they, of course, have a totally different approach than the other 2 brands. So it's pretty easy because I just work with such a variety of clients.
Right. So you're never even considering kind of like that they could even be the same vibe or the same branding just because they're so varied. I think that's really cool that you're able to work with such different kinds of clients all along the way. Kenzi, give us an update here with this slide. Where are you at with it? The one you just created.
Okay, yeah, so I think this is pretty solid. It looks pretty darn cute, if you ask me. A lot cuter than yesterday. So I think that this one is good to go. And now I need to switch this out. And then I want to talk a little bit more about placement strategy. And I know you said we have the artist spotlight today. Is that coming up soon?
Yes, it's officially time for our artist spotlight. Kenzi, you were spot on. So, everyone, it's time for our artist spotlight. Just a little reminder after the artist spotlight, we have about 10 more minutes left here with Kenzi. So, get your questions in now into the Behance chat. That way, we can answer them once we come back. But for today, artist spotlight, we are highlighting drumroll Jennifer. Jennifer Carfora. Oh,
yes,
you got
yes.
it. You got it. We had it right here. Jennifer Carfora. This is their portfolio. It's amazing. Let's just chat about it and tell me what you love. And let's look through some of these projects together, Kenzi.
Okay, I'm absolutely interested in seeing this. Can I click on it? Can I click on it? Oh, maybe she hasn't finished that one. Hold on.
Definitely you can click on the other ones.
Okay.
Ooh, Sweet Spot Cookies. She did branding, collateral, and a custom website here. Ooh, this is looking slick.
Look at those mock-ups.
Those mock-ups are really nice. I mean, it goes to show how important mock-ups are. And would you call that a secondary logo design? That one that's sitting right there on those stickers?
Yeah, or I would actually, maybe this one here was like a brand mark.
There you go.
Maybe this is the primary. I don't know. We haven't really looked through everything yet. Brand mark.
I love the colors of this one and everything.
I love the video. I love video content. I mean, I think that always takes things to another level. Do we want to look at another portfolio piece?
Yes. Let's do it. I'm kind of into that Mary box. You skipped right over it.
Yeah, okay,
I'm
okay.
into it.
Okay.
I think it's really bright, really festive. This one's a little bit more like modern looking than the other ones, let's say. But I think it's very cute. Feels like the essence of Christmas. And once again, it is so adorable. It's like a stamp. Then you have the circle. Then let's say that primary logo maybe is just the Mary box in green. And did she specify the kind of collateral she made for this one?
I don't think so.
See all the way at the top. Custom branding and collateral. Well, we're going to assume it's the box. There's a photo of a box right there. Bright blue, cobalt blue, one of my favorite colors. And it's looking amazing. I think this is a really cool project.
Well, I'm always fascinated by these things right here because every time I go to make these in Illustrator, I always have to relearn how to do it.
Yes. Can you zoom into it at all? I'm not sure if you can.
See. Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh,
that was
okay.
It
maybe
just
not.
zoomed out. That was so weird. Wait, hold on. Maybe
it almost did it and then it didn't.
Okay, that's
just to give everyone a little bit more. Yes. I think that looks really cool. It's like a stamp, which goes with the theme, I think, of the box delivery service, I believe it is. So this is a really cool branding project. Let's take a look at some more of her work. Do you know where she's based out of?
I do not, but I will say that I have followed her a long time and we chat, every so often. And I think that she does amazing work. She is a mom and I'm always impressed by mompreneurs in general because they have to juggle so many things. And I know that she has been designing for quite a while now. So I think she works with a lot of photographers and then maybe a few other industries too. Obviously, we saw the cookie brand and stuff.
Yes, amazing. This is really cool. I totally agree with you. I noticed in her about that she was a mom and everything, and she's definitely just owning it and being such a boss with her business here. This one's really cool. I like that contrast between, let's say, the font and the script font, or maybe that's hand drawn. I mean, I'm not sure, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of her work that I see her do is kind of similar to this. So like usually when I see it, I'm like, that's Jennifer. That's her work, you know? Like some people have that like
Nice.
signature look. I feel like that's kind of hers.
That's cool. And I love the mock-ups here of the website and the business card. It really kind of sells it and makes it feel even more luxe, you know? That's silky
Yes.
green.
Yes, I love the little like I don't know, silk fabric. Love those.
Whatever it may be. Let's take a look at one more project here before we keep on going. Which one are you gonna pick? Ooh, I like
remember,
that one.
yeah, I remember her doing this and I loved it. So
It's gorgeous. Yes, Shaba's Delights, traditional Jewish delicacies. You can see the little icons in the background, which I think is like a nice subtle detail. And then you have the logo mark. Then, oh, it's so nice. And you can definitely like understand everything's like super legible, crisp, upscale.
this is my favorite.
It's so like tight and like perfectly laid out. It's really satisfying to see, and it plays really nicely with the photography too, which I wonder
especially
if
the colors, like this yellow back here.
exactly it all works together really nicely. It seems like they might have gotten some photography done, custom photography done. This is beautiful. I'm so excited we got to take a look at Jennifer's design work. Do you have anything else to add here about Jennifer's work, Kenzi, before we keep on going?
All I have to say is she is an amazing designer. If you guys don't follow her on Instagram, you should definitely go check her out. And she is just so kind. And I definitely wanted to, you know, highlight her work today because I feel like she deserves some more recognition.
Yes, and take a look at her website. She's got a lot of different things available. She's got her services, portfolio, blog, a shop. There's so much available. So go check out her website, everyone. And Kenzi, I think it's time to get back to our project. But before we move on, don't forget to submit your recommendations for creatives to highlight for our next Artist Spotlight. Just head over to the Artist Spotlight tab at the top of the chat on Behance to send your nominations. If you're confused, you don't see this tab, it's because you need to be on Behance watching this stream. So go to behance.net/Adobe Live and you'll see that tab that says Artist Spotlight and you can drop your nominations right in there. All right, we're back here with Kenzi. We're back in this project, in this brand identity project. Kenzi, we have like 20 minutes left on this stream. Tell us what you're going to show us. And a reminder, drop your questions in if you got them.
Yeah, so right now we're just like kind of finishing everything up, showing how it works together. And I'm going to talk about the placement strategy in just a moment here, just kind of figuring out how I want this with this new secondary logo because it takes up a little bit more space up there than the other one had taken up. So need to, and this is up front, so it's in the way. Let me push that back for a second. So I can get this line here and bring that
start making
there.
all of those adjustments. Nice.
And I'm going to expand this so that I can actually make this a little bigger and not affect that stroke.
Oh, cool. Cool. Perfect. That looks tidy.
I don't know if I like this even being on this one because I just feel like this is so eye-catching here. I almost just want to leave that one off. Let me see what it looks like without it.
Maybe it'll have to be. It'll have to go.
Maybe I could do now a fancy color here since we're
integrating a little bit more color now that you change those secondary logos up. Now I feel like we have the liberty to just start adding some color.
Oh. Whoops. I just used my, I don't know how to get back. I just used my mouse to like scroll and now it's on the other.
I think 3 fingers and go back. Three fingers.
Oh, I got it. You're right.
No problem. No problem. It happens sometimes when you're scrolling, you switch windows. No stress. Okay. So I like the yellow. I think it's adding like happy, it brings joy to the table.
Yeah, I could even do some little dotties.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay. Now, Kenzi, I have a bit of a fun question for you here. Okay. And again, those in the chat, if you have questions about brand identity for Kenzi, drop them in the chat. We're still welcoming all the questions, but I want to ask you about something a little different. Can you tell us about your chickens and what inspired you to get chickens. Tell me all about this because I know on your podcast, you have a chicken mascot, you have a chicken in the audio. So I think this is a key part of your presence, and I want to know more.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up on like a farm or anything, but my boyfriend and I actually met when we were in high school, and his neighbor had chickens. And I think that's kind of when I started getting interested in them, because they would always walk over to the yard and like they were cute and you could feed them, and they would just cluck around and they were actually interesting to watch. And so eventually this idea formed in my head that after I graduated, I was going to get chickens, and that was the pet that I was going to have. I didn't want a dog or a cat or a fish. I wanted chickens. So sure enough, after I graduated, I went and got some chickens. We picked them up about an hour away, and we actually got a unique breed of chicken. They're like mixed. So in my opinion, they look way, way cuter than like your average chicken. And you can see them on my podcast Instagram page, or the podcast cover has one of my chickens in it. And so they've just become like a part of my brand in a way as well, obviously for the podcast because they're in the introduction, but also I incorporate them into my brand photos, which I think just kind of helps showcase my personality and like add some like random unique thing to my brand. Like a lot of people, I'll sometimes get DMs and they're like, I saw this chicken thing at the store and it made me think of you, which I find so funny.
And that's great because then you have clients and potential clients thinking of you before they even get started on their design journey. So I think that's amazing. I am dying laughing thinking that I mean, every pet owner thinks their pet is like the cutest version of that pet. And I love that even applies to you with your chickens. You're like, my chickens are the cutest chickens, by the way. Are they a specific breed? Or
yes,
breed?
no, like I'm not even saying that because they're my chickens. I promise you guys, if you go look at like the typical chicken and then you go look at our chickens, big difference.
What is the breed of chicken? Do you know it?
Yeah, ours are mixed with Cochins and AM Somanis. So Somanis are all black chickens. I do have an all black rooster. He's dangerous. He stabbed me before with his little spurs. A lot of people don't know roosters have spurs. And then the hens are just so fluffy. Like they have more fur than the average chicken and they're shorter. So they're kind of like just fluffy little balls that you just want to cuddle. And like, that's what I'm saying.
Oh
when I see them, I'm like, they're so cute.
They are genetically cute.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They're genetically cute because they have like way more fur and they're just a cute breed.
I love that, you guys. If you haven't checked out Kenzi's podcast, go check it out. I know Val just dropped it in the chat, the Unapologetic Designer Podcast. Kenzi, what inspired you to create this podcast? So
I didn't like the yellow on that sidebar.
I noticed. I was like, whoa, she switched. She made a different call here.
Well, I do have a YouTube channel as well. And I did that for a few years, but it wasn't really giving me much exposure. It wasn't really growing that fast. And, you know, when you're on YouTube, you have to make video content, obviously. So it was like there were topics and stuff that I felt strongly about in the design industry that I couldn't really talk about in YouTube videos because like it's not that type of platform. And recently I was like, I think it's time to make a pivot in my business. I'm not really seeing much growth on YouTube. So I think that, you know, a podcast seems right for me because I am very vocal, especially on TikTok and Instagram about things I feel strongly about in the design industry, like setting boundaries with clients, how it's like literally offensive to ask creatives to do free work. And that always has gotten like mixed reactions. Like some people are like, heck yes, I totally agree with you. I totally understand you. And some people are just like, you know, they have the opposite reaction, which to me, that's a sign that I should, you know, dive more into that area. So that's kind of why I created the podcast, and it just launched like 3 weeks ago. And so far I've gotten really great feedback and I just have some really awesome listeners. And, you know, there's so many topics I want to talk about, like some of the ones we've already covered, design school, how corporate America takes advantage of young designers, like just crazy stuff like that, that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough.
Totally. I love that you're like, I have controversial opinions. I'm going to voice them properly in a podcast because it's not working anywhere else. I love that you're just like going with that. And I think you're definitely creating a space to talk about these subjects that sometimes get overlooked just because they're a little touchy. So I am stoked for your podcast. I'm a subscriber and I loved it. I already listened to some of it, you guys, and I really recommend it. Now, Kenzi, we have some time left on this stream. We have like 10 minutes. What are we doing here?
Yeah, so now I want to talk about the placement strategy. And what I mean by that is like when you're building a brand or working with clients, you want to think about where are their products or services going to be showing up, how are they going to be used, who's going to be seeing it, how is it going to reach the consumer or the client. And in this situation, obviously this would be in a grocery store on a shelf. And I think that this is a part that a lot of people don't really think about, especially when they see how different this brand I've created is from the typical syrup brand. But you really have to think, typically when you're an adult and you're standing up looking at the shelf, your eyes are going to be somewhere up here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what you see, and you see like the typical mainstream, most popular syrup brands. But there's actually a stocking fee. I believe that's what's called.
Maybe yeah, I think you're right.
Stocking fee. So basically, brands have to pay a certain amount of money to get their product on the shelf. And I don't know the full logistics, but I do believe it's more expensive to be here on the shelf because that's at the eye level, right?
It's premium property, eyesight property.
Yeah. So as like a new brand entering the market, you're probably not going to want to pay those premium fees to be at the eye level up there. So this would probably be either down here on this level, or it would be even below that. And whose eye level is that?
Kids. I'm the chat right now. Kids, children.
So, if an adult's going through the store, although they may be the ones making the purchase on this product, if they have, their 6-year-old walking alongside them and they're like, pick out some syrup, let's get some stuff to make breakfast. Well, children like bright colors. They like fun, abstract shapes and things like that. So when they look at the shelf, they're probably going to be inclined to pick this fun, unique syrup brand over the other ones that are all like red and blue and kind of blend in with everything else.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you brought this up. I think it's so important to think about this when you're designing for a brand because if it's going to be down there, you have made such a great call to include bright colors that are so much more unique than what else is available at the store. And you're like playing to your audience at the grocery store, not just the audience that's maybe shopping for it online if you're e-commerce or wherever else. I think this is so cool to go that far and think about it. Let me know in the chat if you're planning on kind of including this now in your brand strategy design, brand identity design, because I think this is so neat and just like really emphasizes to the client why you chose those colors, right? Like maybe while you were watching the stream, you questioned why she went with these colors. Here's why. It's so much more unique than what it's available at the store. Not adult eye level.
I'm just like making it super simple, more affordable to place on shelf here. And yeah, again, I think this is one of those brands that it's like, it's so different from what you typically see. People look at it and they're like, well, I don't think that's really going to work. But I feel like a lot of people, when they say that, they haven't thought about this far into it. Like, where's it going to go? Who's actually going to be picking it up? And then who's going to be purchasing it? Because that's the thing when it comes to working with brands of this nature. You have to think about how is it going to get into the consumer's hands. And a lot of times it's probably from the child picking it out and then putting it into the hands of the actual consumer.
Exactly. That kid is seeing it. It's latching on. It's having a tantrum. It wants, julienne syrup and nobody else. And that parent is now bullied into buying it for their toddler. And that's exactly what we want.
Like you can literally just imagine, like, I want the pretty fun one. I don't want that one. And then it's like, okay, we'll get this one. And then they end up loving it because it's a great syrup brand and it tastes good and it's organic. And then they become a repeat customer without the child being there.
Boom, bam. This is what it's all about. I am so impressed. This is lovely. What else are we doing here for julienne's syrup?
So it's pretty much at the end. And so I'm just going to make a little thank you page, and I'm actually going to export this. And since we have some time, show what it really looks like once, I'm finished with this and get ready to send it off to the client. So put a little, might just end it with a brand mark here.
Cool. I love that you've created this entire presentation in Illustrator. It makes everyone's life easier, right? Like you designed it within here and you're building out the presentation as you go, as opposed to kind of backwards designing it and then designing an entire presentation.
Yeah, and a lot of people create like all of the brand marks and logos and everything in Illustrator, then they upload it to another software and create the presentation. And me, living in the country with my chickens, I have terrible Wi-Fi. So I can't spend time uploading everything to something else just to make the cool presentation. Like, I feel like the brand identity in itself should be strong enough to sell on its own without the presentation having all these cool animation effects.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, you guys. And you're definitely just making it such an easier process for yourself too, right? Because this whole presentation is totally customizable. You're not stuck in some template that maybe doesn't work for one client or the other.
And I actually change it up almost every time. I mean, I really utilize like assets from some of the other ones, but for this one, I actually completely change it up just for this like event. And sometimes I'll change it up based on the client's branding and like if I want the presentation to, look a certain way or have a certain font just to match their branding even more.
Nice. That's good to know. So how exactly are you planning on exporting this?
So I will export this as a PDF. And a lot of people are actually surprised when I do this. They think that I usually make this in InDesign, and I'm like, nope, it's all in Illustrator. So basically what I've done here is labeled number 1, this is the introduction, and then I usually just put thank you on the last one, so I know I need to export artboards 1 to 20.
Got it. Okay.
I'm gonna save this.
One last save here.
Now that it's all done. All right, so I always go to File, Save a Copy.
Okay.
Oh, it's still saving.
It's a big file, you guys. Of course, it's, we've got designs here. We have all these slides, 20 plus slides, I think, maybe, or 20 exact. I can't remember. There's that extra one that was just in case.
It's just
so there's
there.
plenty to save. And there's photo elements too. So there's so much going on here.
I always embed the photos, which I know can also
impact the time.
Yeah. And, in a typical scenario, I might go back and add some color back here and change the colors. But just for the sake of time and showcasing what this would look like, we're going to go ahead and export everything. I think it's in a pretty solid spot for the most part.
I agree with you. Let's see if this will work this time. Perfect.
Right. So I always go to Adobe PDF, and then I do 1 to 20. And I'm just going to label this presentation, save, and I go to high quality print. So like I do that because I don't want to preserve the editing capabilities. I want to make sure this is strictly a PDF. And I know a lot of people will like watermark all of their slides and such. I never do that. That's never really been a problem either. I think a lot of the clients I work with, they're really serious about the project, and they're not the type of people who are gonna like try and steal it or screenshot it, because that's just the quality of clients that I'm working with. So I don't ever really worry about doing that stuff.
Perfect. So now that we have to start wrapping up here, Kenzi, can you show us that PDF and give us a recap of everything that we learned today?
Yep. So let's go ahead and open it up here.
Cool.
This is essentially what I send over to my clients, and I would, of course, send them a voiceover presentation. So I would be narrating it, and they would get a little video file of me walking them through this. And I would, recap of their brand overview, and I would probably talk a little bit more about the strategy here. So, I wanted to go at this with a youthful, fun, playful feel. I wanted it to be different from your average syrup brand because we're really targeting families. We're also targeting children. And of course, later in the presentation, we get back into that shelf placement as well, which plays a huge part in this, but really wanted them to stand out and also feel very organic and natural because this is an organic brand of syrup. And then this, I would explain, it goes at the top of their website. It can also be like the main portion of, the reason they do what they do. It could be their bio and social media, things like that. I think the brand mission statement is always very, very important because it really just simplifies, okay, what are we doing? What do we offer? Why are we doing it? And I think a lot of people who, maybe DIY their own branding miss out on this part. And this is a crucial piece, especially on your website at the top. I think a lot of people miss this part. And this is kind of like that thing that tells people, why should you stay on this website or why should you purchase this product?
Yeah, it's totally foundational. Now, quickly give us an overview of all the elements that you designed and a recap of what we learned today, because we have like a couple minutes here to go.
Yeah, so came into this with totally fictional brand idea, wanted to kind of go at it a totally different way than what you typically see on the shelves. And we went through everything from sketching it out, having the sketches in here, digitizing those sketches, having a mood board of inspiration, picking out the colors that felt like fun, playful, youthful. I completely, handcrafted this type here. We spent a lot of time on this Y and this S, and you'll see that in part 1 if you haven't already watched it. And then did use a standard font here for that. And then we played around with this secondary logo. Of course, I ended up going back to that and changing it. Still not totally sold on this. That's okay though. For the sake of time, it's there. That's the secondary logo.
And for the sake of time, give us a little quick overview here. Let's get to that final page or the main page. I think this pattern's really good. Maybe the mock-up.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is what we were creating. Went through the full process, created the full brand identity. So if I sent this off to a client, they would have all the assets they need to show up online cohesively and consistently.
Perfect. Thank you to everyone who joined us throughout the stream. Kenzi, thank you for your time. Everyone, go be sure to follow her everywhere. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. Until next time. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.